Gather round, you speculators and schemers. Today, we journey back to 1720s London, a city buzzing not with bees, but with the intoxicating hum of stock jobbing. In a grubby little alleyway called Exchange Alley, fortunes were being made and lost faster than you can say financial instrument. At the heart of it all, the South Sea Company, a venture that promised exotic riches, but delivered, well, you'll see. Now, our story's protagonist, if you can call him that, is one John Blunt, a man whose name was as sharp as his financial tactics. Along with his associates from the creatively named Swordblade Company, he cooked up a scheme to take on Britain's massive national debt. The government, still reeling from the War of Spanish Succession, was all ears. The plan was simple, audacious, and utterly brilliant in its design. The South Sea Company would absorb the national debt, and in return, creditors would get stock. The hook? A monopoly on trade with Spanish America, a land fabled for its gold and silver. The public went wild. From dukes to maids, everyone wanted a piece of the action. Stock prices soared from £128 in January of 2020 to over £1,000 by August. But here's the rub. The promised trade was underwhelming. Spain wasn't too keen on British ships flooding their ports.
It was a snake eating its own tail, a financial hurricane in a teacup. And when the music stopped in September 1720, the crash was spectacular. Fortunes vanished overnight. Prominent figures like Sir Isaac Newton reportedly lost a fortune. The public was outraged, and Parliament launched an inquiry uncovering a cesspool of bribery and corruption. John Blunt and his cronies had been lining their own pockets all along. Sir Chuckleton, and so the great South Sea bubble burst, leaving a trail of financial ruin and a valuable lesson in its wake. Lesson? The South Sea bubble of 1720 teaches us that when speculative fervor, fueled by promises of astronomical profits, decouples from the real value of an asset, the resulting crash is inevitable and devastating. It's a stark reminder that the market can be driven by narrative as much as by numbers.
Hats off, history buffs, and hold on to your wallets. We're diving headfirst into the chaotic waters of the late Roman Republic, specifically the year 67 BC. The Mediterranean, Rome's lifeline, was less a superhighway for grain and goods and more an all-you-can-plunder buffet for pirates. These weren't your charming, swashbuckling buccaneers. These were organized, ruthless marauders who had sacked over 400 cities, desecrated temples, and even brazenly torched Rome's own port at Ostia in 68 BC. The grain supply was choked, prices were soaring, and the people of Rome were getting hangry. Enter Aulus Gabinius, a tribune of the plebs with a flair for the dramatic and a powerful friend in Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, or Poppy the Great to his fans. Gabinius proposed a radical solution, the Lex Gabinia. This law would grant Poppy unprecedented power to deal with the pirate menace once and for all. We're talking supreme command over the entire Mediterranean and its coastlines, up to 50 miles inland for 3 years. He was given a massive fleet, an army of 120,000 men, and a nearly bottomless treasury. The Senate, particularly the conservative optimates, nearly had a collective apoplexy. They feared giving one man, especially one as popular as Pompey, that much power. It smacked of monarchy, a terrifying prospect for a republic still haunted by the ghost of Sulla's dictatorship just 15 years prior. But the people, facing starvation, roared their approval. Even a young Julius Caesar, ever the shrewd political operator, voiced his support. And what did Pompey do with this extraordinary power? He crushed the pirates in a stunningly efficient campaign. Dividing the Mediterranean into 13 districts, he systematically swept the sea from west to east, clearing it of pirates in a mere 3 months. He didn't just kill them all either. Displaying a canny understanding of economics, he resettled many of the captured pirates inland, turning them into farmers and removing the root cause of their illicit profession. Sir Checkleston. So, the seas were safe, the grain flowed freely, and Pompey was hailed as a hero. But
the Lex Gabinia left a permanent mark on the Republic. Lesson: granting extraordinary power to solve an immediate crisis, however necessary it may seem, can set a dangerous precedent. The Lex Gabinia of 67 BC showed that the Roman Republic was willing to sacrifice its foundational principles of shared authority in the name of security, paving the way for the rise of individuals who would one day dismantle the Republic itself.
All right, you history hounds, picture this. 1932, the rugged outback of Western Australia. A nation calls upon its army, armed with Lewis machine guns, to face a formidable, feathered foe, the emu. No, you didn't mishear me. This is the story of the Great Emu War, a conflict where the enemy was faster, smarter, and frankly, better at guerrilla warfare than anyone expected. After World War I, thousands of Aussie veterans became wheat farmers in Western Australia, often on marginal land. Then, the Great Depression hit them like a ton of bricks. As if things weren't bad enough, in 1932, a horde of some 20,000 emus on their annual migration decided these struggling farms were the perfect all-you-can-eat buffet, trampling crops and tearing down fences. The desperate farmers, many of them ex-soldiers, petitioned the Minister of Defense, Sir George Pearce. Their request? Military-grade pest control. Pearce agreed, dispatching Major G.P.W. Meredith with 2 soldiers and 2 Lewis machine guns to wage war on the avian invaders. The first engagement, near the district of Campion on November 2, 1932, was a fiasco. The emus, with what Meredith later described as the invulnerability of tanks, simply scattered at the first sound of gunfire. They were too fast and too dispersed. The machine guns, designed for trench warfare, were useless. After a humiliating retreat and a roasting from the press, Meredith and his men returned on November 13th.
They had a bit more success, but it was a drop in the bucket. The emus would split into small groups, led by a tall leader who kept watch, essentially outmaneuvering the soldiers. By December 10th, the operation was called off for good. The military had fired nearly 10,000 rounds to kill just under 1,000 emus. It was a dismal failure. Ultimately, the government reverted to a more practical solution, a bounty system, which proved far more effective in controlling the emu population over the following years. Sir Chuckleton says, "So Australia's army was officially defeated by birds." Lesson? The Great Emu War of 1932 reminds us that complex ecological problems rarely have simple, brute force solutions. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is a misunderstanding of the problem itself, proving that humanity's attempt to dominate nature often ends not with a bang, but with a comical whimper.
Put on your dancing shoes, folks, but perhaps leave the common sense at home. We're off to the city of Strasbourg in the Holy Roman Empire, July 18, 1518. The summer was sweltering. The people were starving after a series of bad harvests, and a woman named Frau Trophia stepped out of her house and started to dance. Not a joyful jig, mind you. This was a frantic, silent, and seemingly unstoppable dance. Within a week, she was joined by 36 others. Within a month, the dancing horde had swelled to some 400 people. The city authorities were baffled. Their first brilliant idea? Lean into it! They cleared out the guild halls, erected a massive wooden stage in the grain market, and even hired professional musicians to keep the beat, believing the dancers would simply tire themselves out. This, history records, was a terrible idea. The non-stop music only encouraged more people to join the feverish, uncontrolled mania. The situation grew grim. People began to collapse from sheer exhaustion. They suffered heart attacks, strokes, and broken bones. Some danced until they literally died. The authorities, realizing their dance party solution had failed spectacularly, reversed course. They banned all music and public dancing. The remaining dancers were rounded up and taken to a mountaintop shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, a saint they believed could cure compulsive dancing. But what on earth was going on? On the leading modern theory,
championed by historian John Waller, points to mass psychogenic illness, or mass hysteria, brought on by extreme psychological distress. The people of Strasbourg in 1518 were living through a nightmare of famine, poverty, and rampant diseases like smallpox and syphilis. Their belief system was steeped in superstition, including the legend that Saint Vitus could inflict a dancing plague upon sinners. When Frau Trophia began her strange dance, it's believed she entered a trance state. In a community primed for a supernatural catastrophe, her actions acted as a terrifying trigger, sparking a chain reaction of psychosomatic contagion. Sir Chuckleton. So the music faded and the dancing eventually stopped, but the memory of this bizarre and deadly episode lingered. Lesson: the dancing plague of 1518 demonstrates how collective anxiety and deeply held belief can manifest physically on a massive scale. It's a stark reminder that the mind is a powerful thing, and in moments of extreme stress, the line between social belief and physical reality can become terrifyingly thin.
Greetings, visionaries and electricians. Today we're traveling to 1893 Chicago, a city that, just 2 decades after being a smoldering ruin, decided to throw the biggest, brightest party the world had ever seen. The occasion? The World's Columbian Exposition. But this wasn't just a fair, it was a declaration. Out of the marshy expanse of Jackson Park, a team led by the indomitable architect Daniel Burnham was conjuring a dreamscape, a gleaming plaster and steel white city. Burnham's famous motto set the tone: make no little plans, they have no magic to stir men's blood. He and his partner, John Root, envisioned a perfectly ordered neoclassical utopia to show the world that America wasn't just a land of cowboys and factories, but a true heir to the glories of Rome and Greece. But how do you light up a dream? That question ignited the final spectacular battle in the War of the Currents. On one side was Thomas Edison's General Electric, championing expensive, short-range direct current, or DC. On the other was George Westinghouse, armed with Nikola Tesla's more efficient, long-range, alternating current, or AC. In a stunning power play, Westinghouse dramatically underbid his rival, securing the contract to illuminate the fairgrounds. It was a colossal gamble. On opening night, May 1st, 1893, President Grover Cleveland stood before a hushed crowd, placed his finger on a golden telegraph key, and pressed.
In an instant, nearly 100,000 incandescent lamps blazed to life, bathing the White City in an ethereal, man-made moonlight. It was a spectacle of unprecedented scale. The 27 million visitors who attended the fair didn't just see lit-up buildings, they saw the future. The fair's success was a decisive victory for Westinghouse and Tesla. Alternating current became the undisputed standard for the modern electrical grid, powering the homes and industries of the 20th century. The fair also launched the City Beautiful movement, inspiring a generation of American architects to believe in the power of grand, orderly urban design. Sir Chuckleton. And so, the temporary magic of the White City faded, but its glow illuminated the path forward. Lesson? The 1893 World's Columbian Exposition reveals that nations can define themselves by building audacious, idealized visions of the future. It was a spectacle that didn't just showcase technology and art, but manufactured a powerful, influential, and lasting dream of American progress and ingenuity.
Ever had a neighbor borrow something and just never bring it back? Annoying, right? Now, imagine that neighborly spat, but instead of lawnmowers, it's cities. Instead of angry words, it's armies. And instead of a quiet suburb, it's 1325 northern Italy. Welcome, my friends, to the War of the Oaken Bucket, a conflict so famously absurd, it sounds like a Monty Python sketch.
But peel back the layers of this legendary squabble, and you'll find it's not about the bucket at all. The real story is a bitter, centuries-old rivalry between two political powerhouses, the Guelphs, who backed the Pope, and the Ghibellines, who supported the Holy Roman Emperor. Our two warring cities, Bologna and Modena, were the local chapters of this epic feud. Bologna was staunchly Guelph, and Modena was fiercely Ghibelline. For years, they'd been locked in a cycle of raids and reprisals. In 1325, tensions boiled over after Modena captured the strategic Bolognese castle of Montevecchio. In retaliation, the Bolognese mustered a massive army of about 32,000 men and marched on their rival. Modena, led by the formidable Ghibelline captain Rinaldo Passerino Bonacolsi, could only scrape together about 7,000 troops. The two forces met on November 15, 1325, at the Battle of Zappolino. What followed was a masterclass in underdog strategy. Despite being outnumbered more than 4-1, the disciplined Modenese forces routed the larger, less organized Bolognese army in a matter of hours.
Around 2,000 men were killed in the clash. The victorious Modenese chased the fleeing army all the way back to the walls of Bologna. And as a final act of medieval trolling, they didn't lay siege to the city. Instead, they held a festival just outside the gates to mock their defeated foes, and, as the story goes, snatched a simple wooden bucket from a well outside the city walls to take home as a trophy. That bucket was never returned. Sir Chuckleton says, and so the battle was won, and the bucket became a legend. Lesson: the War of the Oaken Bucket of 1325 teaches us that the stated causes of a conflict are often just symbols for much deeper pre-existing rivalries. The bucket wasn't the reason for the war. It was a vessel into which generations of political hatred were poured, reminding us that sometimes the most trivial objects can become the most potent symbols of a much larger struggle. Wow!
Ah, summer. A time for sunshine, picnics, and blizzards? Pull up a chair, history lovers, because we're heading back to 1816, a year so bizarre, so cold, so utterly gloomy, it earned the nickname the Year Without a Summer. All across the Northern Hemisphere, something was terribly wrong. In New England, farmers woke up to a foot of snow in June. In Ireland, it rained for 8 straight weeks, turning the potato crop to a mushy rot. In Switzerland, the glaciers began to advance again. It seemed as if the sun had simply given up. But this wasn't divine wrath or a magical curse. The culprit was a world away, a colossal volcanic eruption that had taken place the year before. In April 1815, Mount Tambora in the Dutch East Indies, modern-day Indonesia, blew its top in the most powerful eruption in over 1,600 years. The blast was 100 times more powerful than Vesuvius. It was so loud, it was heard over 1,000 miles away. More importantly, it shot a gargantuan cloud of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere. This fine aerosol veil wrapped itself around the globe, acting like a planetary sunshade, reflecting solar radiation back into space and dramatically lowering global temperatures. The consequences were devastating. Widespread crop failures led to the worst famine of the 19th century. Grain prices skyrocketed, leading to food riots in Britain and France.
People starved. Diseases like typhus ran rampant, and thousands of families were forced to migrate, including a young Joseph Smith's family, whose Vermont farm failed, an event that would ultimately set him on a path to found a new American religion. But amidst the gloom, a strange silver lining emerged. The relentlessly bleak weather in Switzerland trapped a group of young English writers indoors at the Villa Diodati. To pass the time, their host, Lord Byron, proposed they each write a ghost story. One of those writers was an 18-year-old Mary Shelley, who conceived the tale of a certain Dr. Frankenstein and his monstrous creation. Meanwhile, in Germany,
The famine drove the price of oats so high that horses became too expensive to feed. This inspired a German inventor named Karl Dreiss to create a horseless alternative, the Lauf machine, or running machine, the direct ancestor of the modern bicycle. Sir Chuckleton. So, the cold eventually subsided, but the world it left behind was irrevocably changed. Lesson? The year without a summer of 1816 is a chilling lesson in global interconnectedness. It demonstrates how a single, cataclysmic event on one side of the planet can reshape societies, economies, and even the course of art and innovation on the other, reminding us that our world is a single, fragile system.
Gather round, athletes and couch potatoes, for what is without a doubt the most disastrous, comical, and downright deadly marathon in Olympic history. The year is 1904. The place, St. Louis, Missouri, during the sweltering heat of the World's Fair. The event? A 24.85-mile foot race so poorly conceived it feels like it was designed by a committee of sadists. The race director, James Sullivan, had a peculiar theory about purposeful dehydration, believing that withholding water would toughen up the competitors. So he set up only one water station on the entire course. The race was held in the middle of the afternoon on dusty country roads with temperatures soaring above 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 Celsius. Cars kicking up enormous clouds of dust were the only things accompanying the runners. What could possibly go wrong? Well, let's check the leaderboard. The first man to cross the finish line was American Fred Lors, who was greeted with cheers until it was revealed he dropped out from cramps after 9 miles and hitched a ride in a car for the next 11. The actual winner, Thomas Hicks, was in even worse shape. Near collapse, his trainers revived him with a cocktail of raw egg, brandy, and doses of strychnine, a well-known rat poison. He was hallucinating and had to be practically carried over the finish line. And the rest of the field?
And a Cuban postman named Andarin Carvajal ran in street shoes, stopped to steal some apples, got sick, took a nap, and still finished fourth. Two of the first ever black African Olympians, Lynn Towney and John Mashiani of South Africa, also competed. Towney was chased a mile off course by aggressive dogs. Another American runner, William Garcia, was found unconscious on the side of the road, his stomach lining so abraded by the dust that he was hemorrhaging internally. He nearly died. Of the 32 men who started this ordeal, only 14 finished. The event was such a fiasco that officials considered eliminating the marathon from the Olympics for good. The outcry over the horrific conditions, however, led to crucial reforms. Future races implemented strict standards for athlete safety, regular water stations, and better managed courses. So the dust settled on the most chaotic race ever run. Lesson: the 1904 St. Louis Olympic Marathon is a darkly hilarious lesson in the dangers of ambition untethered from expertise. It serves as a potent reminder that progress is often born from spectacular failure, as the sheer incompetence on display forced the creation of standards that protect athletes from the very people meant to be organizing their events.